Happy Wednesday. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to today's show. You and I had a
Yeah,
little sneak peek at some of wow, the creepiest of creepy images. But anyway, I would love to hear what this is all about. And we were actually just speaking about France as well, because this, of course, is
yeah,
Paris Week. And France has been in the news a lot lately, haven't they? First, of
right.
course, I know Candace Owens blew this whole Macron and Brigitte Macron wide open and really proved beyond a shadow of doubt that Brigitte is not a female. And that's not a problem, in my opinion, but just own it, at least be honest about it. If you're going to be the first lady, say, I'm not really a lady. I'm just pretending to be one of you girls, but I like it here, so I hope you like me too. We girls are very accommodating. We would probably be quite accommodating then, wouldn't we? Right? But
Yeah.
anyway, and we were also just saying it's interesting about France because in Africa, France is one of the biggest colonizers, right?
Mm.
And they don't. We're looking at and especially if you guys who watched the sequel to the Fall of the Cabal, I think it was last week or the week before, where they're especially talking about the United Nations and stuff like that. France, and I've known this from before as well, but it was confirmed to me then, the French soldiers have been cited as also being of the most violent, and especially when it comes to raping the local people and abuses. uh, no one's innocent, but the French have been particularly cited for that.
Right.
I find it quite interesting, and one tends to think, the French, this the language of love. What a beautiful language French is. I can
Yeah.
only say "Comment ça va?" That's what I can say in French. How are you? Comment ça va?
So beautiful.
So, yeah, it is, isn't it? I like to say it, so I say it a lot. But yeah, so interesting. I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, what do you know about France before we go? Well, maybe you should just open in prayer first,
What
and
we see. Yeah,
maybe we can
let's
talk about
pray and
France.
I'll share some upcoming things and then let's get into it because yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah,
So Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, this time together. We thank you for this conversation. Lord, we know that there are things that are so dark out there. We ask that you would lift the heaviness of it today, that you would show us in the midst of that darkness, Lord, how we can be bold, how we can be your light to the world. Lord, we ask for a new and a fresh boldness. We ask for strength. We ask for endurance. We ask to be able to stand firm against all of the wiles and schemes of the evil one, Lord God. We ask, Father God, that you would help us to understand the depth of the hearts of those who seek after the things that we're going to see today. But more than that, Lord, we ask that you would give us um, fortitude, Lord, to be able to snatch them by the seat of their pants from the fire. We ask for that in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen.
thank you,
All right.
JP.
Yeah. So let me quick share, if it's all right, about what's coming up, and then we will get into this deep dive. It's a deep one.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
like crazy. It's like for me, it's like going back in childhood. So,
Wow.
but coming up starting tomorrow night, I've got the Queen of Heaven workshop, and that will be this Thursday and next Thursday evening. And that workshop is really meant to prepare and equip and help us to understand what we're seeing in our communities, especially with the churches, the Jesuit Catholic churches, the images of Mary that we see presented. And again, this isn't, not everybody using these images are going to understand, the fullness of what it means. But when you see it displayed at the older churches, um, that's going to share, how they're worshiping, what times they're worshiping, and we'll get into how they're using the image of Mary in that. Then coming into April, April 2nd and 9th, I've got the land assignments 3 and 4 coming up. In those, we get into those good old knights and priestesses of the system. And we may get into more knight groups and talk about them and share their symbols coming up that Thursday. And then in Land 4, we get more into decoding the structure of the buildings. And I always try to have fresh new places on that. So I encourage you to watch that. And then I think it was that April 13th through the 17th, we'll have another call to prayer. And then April 17th, I'll have the next Work of His Hand strategy group. So I encourage you guys to look into all those things coming up. Great opportunities to get involved. And thank you for putting up where people can find my courses, my workshops, my events on my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. And most importantly, my affidavits on timothycharleshomeseth.com. And be watching on there. There's going to be so much coming forward, and we'll get into that more in this next episode, but there's just so much going on in the world right now. And we'll tackle it one shenanigan at a time. Oh, you got to unmute, Shanti.
I was just agreeing that it will be one shenanigan at a
Yeah.
Goodness me. I'm trying to unmute myself and muting myself. In fact, I had a dream about that last night. You know, when you talk about something and you just kind of have a flashback of a dream, something that we're just talking about now triggered something for a split second and now it's gone. Anyway,
Right.
we were talking about the shenanigans, and yes, we like unpacking the shenanigans, don't we? Dealing with the shenanigans. We have the shenanigans ourselves, but very nice ones. We like the shenanigans we do,
yeah. There's a lot coming up. I think we're just going to have more and more. So it will be definitely, the world is getting interesting.
Very, 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 very interesting. And it's so in your face. What you're seeing, and it's what we were saying earlier on, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore. For me, it almost feels, Jessie, and I don't know what you think about that, and maybe, I don't know, some of our viewers can chime in. Someone was saying to me the other day, it's like, I think their grid is collapsing. And I think what's happening is it's almost like, there's a desperation, and all the cockroaches then start scurrying in desperation to the same place, and mayhem and chaos. So it's almost like that feeling to me. It's a desperate thing. So they're going kind of like way beyond what they intended to at this point in time to try and achieve what they were meant to try and achieve in a much more subtle way, as they always have. I mean, let's face it, they've been super slick in terms of the way they've rolled out death camps and whatever it has been for humanity. But it looks to me now things might be changing. I don't know. I'm just seeing a lot of stuff.
I mean, Shanti, they put out that those are for our good,
Yeah,
and they're going to come up with some creative way that it's for green disposal. Don't we all want to be on board with green disposal? Better the planet. They'll keep rolling out their lies. And that's what we're going to get into today. When I saw some of the images from the Paris Gala, it was a huge flashback. These images are not anything new. The only difference is that they usually don't make things like this public. And really, it's the battle the battle for them really began back in 2016. Around that time, between 2016 to 2018, there were several high priests, five of them in particular, that began to battle online Some of them wanted to keep to the old ways. They wanted to keep everything hidden and secret and underground, while the other ones were ready to, air it out in front of everybody's face. And they really began to fight for that. And it was a nasty, nasty, I call it a witches' battle. Because at the end of the day, I wouldn't even call them warlocks. They act more like witches. But, these high priests and priestesses had to be separated. And half of them were sent down to Louisiana, and you see their work with Hexfest right off the Gulf every year. And you'll also see surrounding them sovereign military light side like Fatima that will, always be around starting a week or two before Hexfest and supposedly praying over the area, but really they're all doing perimeter setup. Then the other half were sent to good old Chicago, and really they run probably, I would say, the largest, let's just say male pornography. We'll put it in that category, but it's far beyond that. So that's how they split things up. And, but what do we see now after that? Bohemian Grove, on their website, they shut down their website and came out public that they were sending communications through the Cathedral of Notre Dame, or they called it the Cathedral of Luxembourg, but basically it was Notre Dame. Then Notre Dame burned down, mysteriously. So you get all sorts of stuff. But, where this comes out of is the imagery. Every year, and this is for generations, you get several places where the elite are going to gather, and you've got a lower end witches ball too, but several of them. You have the yearly witches ball that will be in Columbus, Ohio. That is one of the largest where they're going to gather. Then you have the yearly grand high witches ball every October that usually was held in Massachusetts in Salem with Lori Cabot Kent. And for that one, she, usually they usually have it between October 26th to 28th. And in that, she also will summon the Queen of the Dead, which is one of Astaroth's names connected to her Lilith side, and the imagery of her being the queen of the, the dead and the damned. Then you would get also, and it could range, but usually it was in the fall, usually in October, you're going to get your Illuminati ball. Sometimes it was a little earlier in September, but usually somewhere between September and October. And that one was at Jacob Rothschild's mansion. And they would do a massive dinner with it too, where, as people come into the event and they're going to pay to come in, they're going to pay extra for the dinner, and they're going to pay even more extra for the walk in the woods after the event if they want to participate in that. So how they would set things up is you'd have kind of the main entryway, but then you're going to get that oddities circus feel. I mean, it would be, every room would get worse and worse. And there were some hallways or wings where they're going to limit, like you're not going to be able to get in there unless you're a certain degree. But it's all formed to cater to their sick desires. So imagine, as we see these images, that there are things that are going to go with it, to the expendable children, to people that they may pull in to be sacrifices for the night. And this is how people will show up to these parties. Like they will dress in odd attire. They want to give that feel of something otherworldly. So let's get into that. And we did see, starting back last year, we saw with the Olympics, Lady Gaga. We saw her there bidding in her pink fluff feathers. And, I told you guys that after Jacob Rothschild's death, that there were contracts that were going up for bid. And I think that France bought some of those contracts. And could that include that they now will host the Illuminati ball? I believe that is what we're seeing. And I think that this gala is kind of their way of inviting each other, saying, hey, we're going to have the ball. And they're preparing people for that, for whenever they're going to put that out. But let's go ahead and get started and dive into some of these horrific images. So with this, it's interesting because it starts off with the wedding theme here, and we know that in their world, contracts, especially with entities, with one another, with their circle groups, they're actually considered marriage contracts, covenant contracts, and they are considered unbreakable. The moment you are born into a brotherhood family line, whatever is foreseen or perceived or prophesied about you, whatever your higher ups are deeming that you are going to be used for, they're going to start to gear things towards that for you. You don't have an option. All the benefits that they're going to throw your way are automatically there. But the moment you start rejecting any of those things, they're going to kind of put you on the short list and you get less and less benefits. But if you embrace everything, the world is going to be afforded to you. And that's going to come with contracts to Lucifer as well. So in this, they start off with a reminder that you've got the contracts. And this would happen at the Illuminati ball as well, where you're going to see different blends of earth and ceremony. And, this kind of reminds you of the corn contract. That's what it reminded me of, corn and fire, infernal contracts. And they've got kind of like that weird kind of fairy look going on with it. But I think it's just, they're reminding that everybody's under contract and that this is part of it. Go ahead to the next one. So then we start to see, mixed images, and it's not just men, women, people who consider themselves trans. You start to get things that aren't even earthly, like old images of, that have been portrayed throughout different movie themes. These are more things that we would see in some of the circuses, where you get some of that imagery, but things that also are blending, looking like the one guy there on the the right, it looks like the old mortician, those that would be working among the grave. You got kind of that look going on within what looks like a flesh bride. It looks like he's pieced together different pieces of a body, adding a woman's image to himself. You get some of the fairy-like creatures, fallen angel type creatures and wings of fallen angels. And it's interesting because they have like behind them that theme, falling in love. But so this is, it looked like the theme for this also was the one present. But, you know, when you see that, is it talking about who's present? You know, is it the fairies? Is it these evil spirits? Is it those who are engaged in necromancy and working among the dead? Um, so just lots of interesting things here. But these are the founders of it, Dalton and Bhaskaran. So we shall keep going and see what kind of, you know, and again, they may be the ones holding the contract and they're setting the stage, but let's go ahead to the next one here. Yeah, so these two really, you know, it begins to start to shake us as we see things going on with the mutilation of appearance. And, you know, again, you're seeing things that are otherworldly beginning to form. Something that, you know, the image is displaying an older, beautiful woman, yet when you see the face, there's something non-human about it, something very cat-like. You know, even them leaving this, what looks like the scarring, you know, like somebody's had work on their face. So you begin to see this mixture, people forming and fashioning an image. And what is that image? It's not human. You know, and in fact, it begins to scare us because, you know, what are they doing to the body? And they're wanting us to receive that as okay. And, you know, it looks like facial surgery, but people beginning to not even return a normal look. You know, so yeah, it starts to get deeper from here. Go ahead to the next one, because, you know, the skin is not the only thing that people have begun to change. They begin to change their teeth. And, you know, you get some of the older horror movie looks too. That's what that gentleman reminded me of. But also that theme with the blood on the teeth, right? What does that make us think of? That they're eating something, that they're consuming flesh. And then we see the pearls, which we, you know, we saw even some of this imagery of the pearls around the face with Bad Bunny. That's an image that goes back to, you know, representing the order of Melchizedek. But then with this image, you just get, you know, things that begin to get very sexual, where, you know, if we put it quite frankly, she's got a ball, a pearl in her mouth. You know, but then you get even further where the lockjaw almost theme with that. And they would do things like, you know, they would have people at the balls dressed in costumes like these, and they would kind of be parading around the areas where you could get into that form of entertainment. So we're going to begin to see things that are displaying, you know, what's the package deal? What's the service that is going to be offered? What can you engage in? And they're going to begin to put that into their clothing and their clothing attire. Now, I want to address one more thing with this one, because I think that there definitely is more. The unique type of garment that the supposed woman is wearing on the left there, that type of cloth is very similar to the Mormons' undergarments, only they would be thinner. But it's interesting that you see almost like you see where the navel is supposed to be there. Oops, hold on one second. You see the line contracts, and you know, usually those would be up by the belly button, but they have them very low, and that line contract is usually to Ashtaroth. So it's interesting that they have that like that. And it's almost like implying that now there's a cut in the line contract and there's going to be an opening up, an expansion of it. And where is it going to expand? You know, it goes to Ashtaroth's other contract, you know, rather than the top of the womb at the navel, it's representing the entry of the womb down below. So I found that fascinating. Go ahead to the next one. Again, you know, we see a lot with the teeth. We see a lot of the imp or the sprite or the fairy imagery, modifications to the faces representing your fairies, your imps, your sprites. When they do the money across the eyes, and this is really interesting. I can't remember what it's called, but you get your seers, those that are very strong in visions and dreams, and they will use it for, or use that skill to see kind of like an oracle or kind of like a psychic, but they're going to, a clairvoyant would be another word, but they're going to be available to give fortunes, to give words, you know, so as they're at these events, they will be seeing things, and they put something over their eyes. And we see here that like they also have it so they can keep it on while their eyes are open. But they'll walk along the events and give things to people, give words and stuff. What's interesting with this is we have the red hand. Now, the red hand is distinctly connected to your walls underground. It's connected to the ritual killings. And, you know, every year they'll have those that are coming into the system who are turning 5 go down and put their handprints on the walls. It also can represent victims, you know, the victims and their blood that is shed and spilt. So you get some of that, but when you combine that with the seer, it's almost like they're going to be using, you know, like how I've seen it used is they literally will be walking around and all of a sudden they're going to put their hand on somebody and they're going to give a word from the dead or, you know, the demonic. And I think that that's, you know, what this is displaying is that necromancy, that speaking for the dead. And they would have at the Illuminati Ball seances, live seances that are not like the ones you see in the movie. You know, in those seances, you are going to see stuff happen. It's pretty intense. And these people, you know, they're not bringing up, when they're doing their clairvoyancy, they're not bringing up low-level demons. You know, you're talking higher level demons that are going to interact. And that's the scary thing. You know, people that seem weak or small all of a sudden are very strong and, you know, are able to make things happen in the witchcraft world. You know, quite, if you have never seen any of those things, it can be quite alluring, the display of power that they show. Go ahead to the next one. So again, you know, we see things that these images represent the underworld. And in that, you know, we see the one guy with the teeth, the filed teeth, whether they're really filed or whether it's just for show, that's the question. But you do have individuals that really file their teeth, and they will plate their teeth with different metals, whether that's gold or silver. They can even do other forms, but you get people that look just like this underground, and usually they're involved in torture, and some of them have never been up to the surface. They are albinos. They will not have hair. And, so this scarily, is reminiscent of things. Most of them aren't going to have the red makeup and eyes, but they can have weird things that they've done to their bodies. Some of them are blind um, because they've never seen any light. And you don't get a defining of the iris of the eye when it's just all dark, when they roam in the darkness. You also don't get pigments to the skin. You get that albino effect. The blinding, though, can also be, again, connected to seers. Many of the upper elites would use the blind as oracles. You see the girl that has the pearls and all money attached to her dress, representing the young, the expendable, those that are sexually exploited. Then we see the other one, the thing with the eyes too. That is also the other way you can get the eyes for those who are way down deep. You get also, we've talked about the mole children and had an episode on that those who have been generationally bred down under that have never seen light, and you can get the all dark eyes as well because of that. So all right, go ahead to the next one. You're going to see a lot with the feathers, this representing, I believe, the seraphim, but they've kind of done some unique things, as you can see, with the fallen wings, where they've got them coming out of the front, the back. You also have the peacock look for the top, for the headdress, which, the peacock and the multiple sets of wings are going to go back to the seraphim and the image of, that we see in the order of the seraphim, but also that image of fallen angels whose wings have been clipped because they're evil and their goal is corruption. So go ahead to the next one. And this, as we know, Michelle Lamy is, one of the high priestesses. She's very dark. You'll see a lot of, I don't know what else to call it besides just dark, but again, you're getting the dark angel imagery. Also with her, with this one, you get a blend of certain woodland creatures. She's highly engaged in a lot of the major solstices. Every coven is going to be overseen by a mother goddess and a druid, and then you're going to have a blending of covens where they're going to have even yet a higher sorceress and a wizard that are going to kind of run the blended covens. In that, they're going to call on all sorts of woodland creatures to do their bids, whether that's Sasquatch, you can get the Yetis, but that's kind of the imagery that she's bearing is, somebody that is going to be engaged with, woodland creatures like that. And that also is a demonic look. You get some of your demons having that look as well in the shoulder area. So again, what does that display? You know, these people engage in demonic revels, they have sex with demons. And, you know, I would firmly say she's one of those who does that. Then you have her next to another lady down below that, you know, has more of that kind of reptilian look. And, you know, you're going to see a lot of the serpent imagery because they're going to be honoring the serpentine spirits and the entities that they've made contracts with. All right, go ahead to the next one. So, you know, you see a lot of the mixing of the beauty with the very grotesque. This one, you know, is just very interesting because you almost get, you know, again, the imagery of the facial surgeries, the modifications to the face, the fairies, the more like you get bird-like fairies that very much look like this with the eyes and the nose that's very low. Some of your cat-like creatures could be like this, but notice how many pearls are being worn at this event. I mean, that's crazy too. Again, you've got the gloves, but they're dirtied. You have the red handprints on the gloves representing those who sacrifice and ritually kill those who are part of the elites. Go ahead to the next one. Yeah, so again, we see the big bows, we see the gloves. We can't see if hers have the red hands. I'm assuming they probably did. You again see the plastic surgery look, and again, a different modification to the face, implying that there's, you know, a false face on, or that they're doing mutilation to their face and they're calling that beautiful. Go ahead to the next one. So again, you know, dark things. This really started reminding me of a homage to some of your socialite women who would commonly wear clothing like this. You have to your left there, that was a common look for Mary Lou Whitney, you know, as her husband owned the horse or was highly involved with the horse races and the gambling in that. You would get a lot of your socialite women involved with the horse races, and you would see a lot of the elaborate hats like that as they were going out in society, and more of the suit dress type look. The one to the right then with the sweater skirt looks, that was very, you know, that look was very common to Gloria Vanderbilt with the hair slicked back like that, the sweater, the skirts. You know, so I have to, in my mind, this goes back to, you know, high priestesses, and they're doing a homage to those who have passed away. And that gets into your necromancy, which is that why there's the gray. Gray is used in several ways in the system. Magically, it can represent those that are skilled in both light and dark magic. You know, your high sorceresses and your wizards, you will have white, gray, and blacks, and they will wear appropriately that style of or that color when they appear for certain events, displaying that, you know, that they are in what type of magic they're involved in and which way they'll go, or if they'll go both ways. So that is one way that it's displayed in the system. It's also with earth magic, you get those that gray can be a common color for those that are highly engaged in the earth magic. as well as brown is another. Browns, greens are all colors that they'll wear if they're engaged in the earth magic. Gray also is a color that they will wear when they're highly involved in the necromancy and the things of the dead. So that could be, different layers based on their degrees. It could represent different things. Go ahead to the next one. Again, we're seeing the socialite. We see the white gloves with the red hands, and it kind of really displays this image of class, people who are good, but then what are they behind the scenes? That guy with the red teeth, it just, it reminds me of people that they're looking good one way, but really they're going to consume flesh and be killers and psychopaths behind the scenes, engaging in vampirism and mutilation and killing, so it's scary that the things that they're bringing out in this gala. Go ahead to the next one. Again, we see the red gloves, and again, people dress like, socialites, that imagery of being good, of being pure. Twins are something that are used a lot in the system, and why the pink? It's common for them where in families where there were twins, they would have one that would be chosen to be dark, the other light. In that, it was very common for the light or the good one to be sexually, abducted, abused, used. And we know that pink often represents that, those who are abused and used sexually, abducted and abused, trafficked. So is that what that's representing? Then, they can do the twinning several ways. You could also have, the older and the younger, where, you have someone who's training their successor into their position. That's what it reminded me with the two men there, one being trained up and still, in that gray position. They're learning both sides because they haven't decided which way they really want to go yet. But go ahead to the next one. Yeah, so here again we see fuller the outfits, and we see the one has the red hands there again. And then again, just that mixture of what you think would be beautiful, pleasing, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening with the images of the face. And it's interesting in all of this because the face in scripture, our faces are meant to display the glory of the Lord. And you see that with Moses when he goes up on the mountain, the glory of the Lord shines on his face. But what do we see on their faces? Is it the image of the gods that they worship and those that they have contracts with? I think it is, that they mutilate their face to represent that of those that they worship. Go ahead to the next one. Now here we see just more fuller the outfit. Again, you get that imagery of the kind of the hospital type robes. This one almost reminded me of the straitjackets, that blending of the psychotic, the asylums, and the mutilations that would happen there. And that the straitjackets are something that they will use in some of the ritual rooms. They will also use them as they're doing the adrenochrome. If they have somebody that they don't know what levels they can take, they will put them in a straitjacket. They also will put people in that if they get out of control. Sometimes it will be to keep people in control. It will limit the damage that they can do to another, leaving that damage pretty much to the head and the neck, which is the most vulnerable part when you're dealing with adrenochrome. It just makes people want to, they rage on it. And in that rage, they just want to kill and shred and tear apart. Well, when you leave somebody's neck vulnerable, that's the most vulnerable part. What's going to happen when they're attacking each other? It's going to be a death kill, in that. So, it's not, why do they want to preserve the rest of the body? It's so they can use the organs. If one of them dies, they can still harvest. But yeah, that's, it just gets darker and darker. Let's go to the next one. Again, we see some of the imagery of the seers, the oracles, and, they would parade in different images. You could get some that would seem very normal. Sometimes they would even use their hoodie or they'd have like their capes that would drape over the face. Some even, you get the old imagery of those that I just call them the plague gods, but they would have the draping cape over their face, and then many of them would have kind of the extended leather that is in the shape of a bird beak. And that was a common imagery of certain high-level alchemists and those that are the plague doctors, or many of them were into different forms of necromancy, working with the dead. And then you do get a lot of, among your socialites, your high-level business women, your high-level sorceresses that will be used as oracles, and, specifically are in positions of power because they're a high-level sorceress and because of their ability to see and predict. And again, you see the red hand gloves on her as well. Some of them, they're a form of, we'll call it seeing. Some of them, let me think how to put it into words. Some of your oracles have certain things that will have to happen in order for them to be able to receive the vision or the dream or the word, the clairvoyancy. And so they'll require certain things. That could be a sacrifice, that could be sexual, it could be a dead body, where they have to touch a dead body in order to be able to see. So, there's different things that each oracle will require in order to receive the vision. And that will go with their contracts with whatever spirits are enabling them to see in the spirit world. All right, go ahead to the next one. Again, here we just see different forms of clairvoyancy. And with this, it really is scary in that world. We see the one woman, man there on the left, where you've got that image of the clairvoyant, but the eyes are open, right? But what's bound? It's the hands. If you ever see that in real life, run. You don't want to be near those who have their hands bound. Usually those are your clairvoyants that they're going to receive their vision at the brink of somebody's death. That's why their hands are bound, and it can get worse. You'll get very psychotic behaviors. which some people like they want to go through that. I don't know why, but some people, thrive on that adrenaline spike, and it's a psycho trip and a half, and they'll keep their hands bound, which does not mean they cannot do things. This is where you'll get the levitating and the all sorts of crazy, and it's worse if their hands become unbound, which usually they do somewhere in that process. You just don't know when, or they all of a sudden have other hands, and then you're like, what in the world? So, these ones, again, you'll get different forms. Your one on the right was a common form with men, and, they would be dressed as the women, and usually, that would be your sexual. They're going to get their clairvoyancy and vision as they are engaging in anal sex with that. But and that was just, some of the things that I witnessed at the Illuminati ball are very, very similar. I mean, it's crazy how similar this is. Go ahead to the next one. Again, you get, your workers down deep, and, they're just going to display that imagery of, the albino look, those that are in charge down below, and those who are in charge of different forms of torture. They also can be in charge of, you're going to get, in some areas, you'll get your dungeons. You'll see those, where those are in your coat of arms, where it looks like you've got the knight's helmet that's facing forward, but it kind of looks like the frog. That usually is representing where your dungeons are. And it's common to see people like this down in those deep areas, overseeing what happens around those dungeons. Go ahead to the next one. This is going to be a little different than your dungeons. This is more going to be your gothic, your vampire on the left there, and then more your connection. It could be gothic, vampire, but more your fairy sprite imagery. And usually you're not going to see the black robe with the fairy sprite imagery. You're going to see more colorful, more flowy, but maybe they're getting fairies now that are going to hang around the dead and the vampires. I'm not sure on that, but I'm going to say that as a joke. Dark fairies, I guess is what they would call them. But we see that imagery here that represents that goth vampirism, which is hot. It's so heavy in the underground. So many of your witches, warlocks are brought into that vampirism and then really succumb to that. They give their life to that. Go ahead to the next one. And, here again, dark workers. Now, this imagery you get with your Nazis, your Nazi women, will be dressed in suits, and it was common for them to have boots like that. The suits would be white, black, or gray. That also beyond going with their magical types or abilities, also would be their classification. Like you would see a lot of the gray Nazi women uniforms, like we saw Madonna wearing one, similar to those at the Oscars with Sam Smith when he was dressed up all demonically. And that could represent your head of, those that are going to oversee certain areas, certain groups of soldiers. You'd see it over your Nazi camps, over some of your groups of men. But the black and white, like this would be more your higher level socialite elite women, who are going to not be forthright about their Nazism. Yet you see in this a blending between, those that are all dark. You can get your all black guys represent, in the, I wouldn't say with these uniforms that it's necessarily representing your mole children. At your higher levels, you can get your vampires also having the complete black eyes, or your high level sorceresses. You get those, they shave their hair because that's part of the sacrifice for their being able to have their powers and abilities. So you can get that too at the higher level of the sorcery. And go ahead to the next one. So celebrities spotted at the Paris Fashion Week included actors Hollywood, Zendaya, Margot Robbie, Nicole Kidman, which we all know Nicole is high level, Emma Watson, Jennifer Lawrence, Anne Hathaway, which watch, there's some future things with Anne Hathaway that are going to be coming out that definitely are connected to the Brotherhood. A new movie coming out that's going to be very strategic, and I believe it's Mary is what it's called, but you're going to see a lot of your imagery of your mothers of darkness in that movie, and some things leading up to end time things. Kirsten Dunst, Elizabeth Olsen, models we see in fashion icons like Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell. Naomi is highly involved in the Brotherhood. Cara Delevingne, Paris Jackson, music artists like Dua Lipa, Rosalia, Travis Scott, which we saw we've talked about his Masonic ritual. That was one of his concerts in Houston, Texas, where he literally was performing alchemy and blood magic in the event. Gracie Abrams. We see reality influencer celebrities, Kim Kardashian. We know she's a high priestess. Kylie Jenner, Kendall Jenner, they're all high priestesses. We've also, talked about their connection with the perfume, which is huge in the fashion industry, and how that's a form of alchemy. They use it in charms. They use it in connection to Drino, other things. Other notable appearances, Jaden Smith. We know him and his dad are connected to Brotherhood. Barbie Fiera, Chappelle Rowan, which we know she is, David Castle, and Yeon Yun. So, and I might not have said some of those names correctly, but go ahead. Did we have two more on this one? Or is that it? That's it.
Seems to be. Wow. I mean, what a decode. There's a couple of things that are so clear to me, is that I think I can say with pretty much 99% certainty, every picture I saw is like of a soulless being. So they really are moving towards the soulless society, the zombie kind of look, the staring, these like MK Ultra eyes. I saw that a lot. I noticed that a lot.
The death of dead souls,
Yes, absolutely. So that whole sense of, well, you're just a vessel and you control, basically. That to me came through loud and clear. Anne Hathaway, interesting you mentioned it. I watched something the other day, which I didn't know, is that she's actually a transgender, and she spoke about it publicly. So she's actually, no, it wasn't AI. I can still tell the difference between AI and what's real. But she was actually doing a talk, which is interesting. And the more as time goes on, it's like these people are revealing that now. Why didn't she reveal that way back then? It's kind of
Mhm.
like, and the same with Nicole Kidman. It's kind of like they've known or it's been in the hush hush. And
Yeah.
now suddenly, when the tide is turning to the extent that it needs to turn, all these celebrities are coming out as these transgenders, um, and making it safe or okay or fashionable for the youngsters who are doing it or wanting to do it or are thinking of doing it or have done it. It's okay because we've done it. I mean, this is such dangerous territory. It is such dangerous territory because these are human beings that have been forced, that have had something so valuable, their sense of who they authentically are, stolen from them, sometimes even before birth. And
Yeah.
that makes sense because the soul does not forget. The body does not
Mhm.
forget what you are meant to be.
Yeah.
So, that inversion is a very dangerous thing because that is a recipe to
Right.
create a psychopath. I mean, we can talk about we could do a show on that sometime on the dangers of what that actually means, not
Yeah.
just
Of the
oh well I've got
inversion.
to wear a dress and I should be wearing and what does it actually mean? Because I'm actually researching that a lot right now.
Yeah,
Um,
that'd be a great show.
yeah, and another thing that I saw a lot here was the albinos.
Hmm.
And I know in some of our previous shows, and I also know with shows I've done with Beverly Rhodes here in Africa, albinos are one of the most highly targeted people around. They are highly targeted. Their organs and whatever it is they are after are highly sought after. Um, can you perhaps give us some clarity on that? Because again, there's a lot of that in here. I'm seeing a lot of vampirism, that vampire vibe. That I'm
Yeah.
seeing a lot of here, and of course the albinos and oh those teeth, that guy with the red teeth, and he's like this suave looking gray man that every woman thinks, oh, I just
Hmm.
love to be on his side kind of thing, because he paints that image so well, right, of this
Yeah.
well taken care of,
Well,
successful.
the albinos and the mole children are usually those that are highly sought after. I don't even know what to call them, but they set aside certain people underground to serve the giants. And um, the albino and the mole people are those that are usually connected to giants somewhere and not necessarily for eating or consuming, um, but they'll, be servants. And I think it's usually because they're the most docile and they're highly limited. Your albinos just can't go out and be out in the sun. Um, the same with your mole people. They can't see to get out, they're bound by the darkness. So, one of the areas I've talked about where they have that is under the Pentagon in Emerald City, across the big cavern. You have a giant area there where you're going to find people like that. And then another area would be under New York City, under you've got a military lab there in a very deep area. That was one of the highest breeding program areas for those that would be albino and mole children. And then I think South Carolina is the other big one. But you get other areas that will have them, but those were some of the biggest, and that I remember right off the bat. And the South Carolina one
So
extended into some of the other states around there, Alabama. Um,
are you saying that they really serve the giants as what? Food, as
No, they do
Um,
work. They do work. Like they are always working. Building underground mining is a huge thing. They'll have them involved in the mining, um, mining for, precious minerals, jewels in the raw. You'll get a lot of them connected to earth things that they're doing under there.
is that specifically, I mean, I'm trying to understand why they, I mean, they could choose any children for that, right? Why specifically the albinos?
Well,
And
because their vessels
are
are
they bred
closer.
for that?
Yeah, because of the skin, their vessels are closer to the skin. Their blood vessels are not deep. So they're able to you get a let me think, when you get into like the deeper layers, they're low oxygen areas. So a normal person put
Uh,
down there is going to have
I'm with
trouble
you. I'm with
versus
you.
those who are made in the dark, whose blood vessels are higher up. They don't have as much trouble. They're able to do more work down there and be more productive because of the way that their body is formed and the way that they take the oxygen in through the skin.
So
So
I'm wondering, how did they actually discover this then? Did they did they discover that because some people were born with what is termed a recessive gene, in the African community, usually with albino kids,
yeah.
right? Because there's, I mean, I've seen a few, yeah, not many, but there are a few. I remember in the town where I was growing up, there was a well-known albino there. Everyone knew him, but there was only one. And so I'm wondering, did they clone this? Or, I mean, are albinos part of their experiments? I shudder to ask, but I
I
really am
think that,
curious
yeah, they're
about that.
definitely part of the experiments, but I put it far beyond. I mean, this has been going on for centuries because, going back to your times where giants were prevalent, I think that, you know, that land of Canaan um, had some of these things. So, we can't know exactly how they discovered or when, but I think it goes back to the land of Canaan, your times before, even with giants. Um, oh, hold on. So I think
Wow.
that it's been going on for generations and ancient centuries.
Sure. This is wild. And it's like, and when you see all those people emulating at the Paris Fashion Week, emulating albinos, it's
Mm-hmm.
so offensive. I really find that so offensive because it's obvious they're talking about underground activity. When you talk about it like this, that's why I was questioning, you know, what makes the albino kids so
Well, we
targetable for
should
them.
get into, yeah, because it gets into your underground water cities too, because that's the same features you would get with your Atlanteans. So it goes back to some of those of, them wanting to enslave the different, um, you get more of that pale, thin skin, having more energy, um, more authority, more power, and then wanting to suppress that in certain people and, to keep it suppressed throughout the generations.